So there were some new findings when it came to the Hillsborough disaster. 36 years ago, 97 Liverpool fans tragically lost their lives during a FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield. And 36 years ago, 1989, this took place. And we are still finding out things. There are still things that we don't know officially when it comes to this very, very tragic day. Probably the most tragic day in English football history. One of the most tragic days, full stop, in football as well. And, you know, the calls for the justice for 97, you know, that is something that has been said for a very, very long time. There have always been calls to find more transparency when it comes to this, find out more about it, because yeah, I mean, people say about, not to go into too much of a rant before I go into the actual article here, but people talk about, you know, the British police being the best in the world and being the envy of the world and all this and that. And then you read stuff like this and you're like, they're just trying to cover their own backs, aren't they? There's some good coppers, don't get me wrong. There's some good coppers in the UK, and I don't want to say that they're all terrible or whatever, but there are some really bad ones. There really, really are. And the police on that day, a very, very shameful day for them as well. South Yorkshire Police Force. As someone who used to live in South Yorkshire, someone from Sheffield originally, I just know how inept they are. They haven't really got that much better in the last 3 decades. But let's not go into a rant about that. Let's go into these findings, guys, here on ESPN. Shout out to these guys for covering it. It's something that I had to really dig deep to find, actually. You know, I thought this would be headline news, but a lot of the media not really wanting to talk about it so much. I wonder why. Anyway, an investigation into the Hillsborough disaster has found that 12 police officers would have faced gross misconduct proceedings for fundamental failures on the day and concerted efforts to blame fans in the aftermath. Because yes, the police tried to blame the Liverpool fans for this. Yeah, you can see why they want justice for this now, can't you? A report published on Tuesday by the Independent Office for Police Conduct also upheld or found cases to answer for misconduct in 92 complaints about police actions. But the law at the time means that no officers will face disciplinary proceedings because they had all retired before the investigations began. Justice. We're definitely getting justice here, aren't we? 100%. Investigations into the disaster by the IOPC, the independent police people I mentioned before, and the Criminal Probe Operations Resolve began in 2012 following the publication of the Hillsborough Independent Panel report and cost more than £150 million. Yes, because justice is very expensive in the UK. Nicola Brooke, a solicitor at Brudie Jackson Centre acting for several bereaved families, said it was bitter injustice that nobody would be held to account. She said, quote, "This outcome may vindicate the bereaved families and survivors who have fought for decades to expose the truth, but it delivers no justice. Instead, it exposes a system that has allowed officers to simply walk away, retiring without scrutiny, sanction, or consequence for failing to meet the standards the public has every right to expect. Yes, the law has now changed. This loophole cannot be used in future, but for those affected by this case, there is no consolation for that. They are left with yet another bitter injustice, the truth finally acknowledged, but accountability denied." End quote. Among those who would have cases to answer for gross misconduct if they were still serving were South Yorkshire Police's then Chief Constable Peter Wright and Match Commander David Duckenfield, as well as Sir Norman Bettison, who went on to become Chief Constable of Merseyside Police. 97 Liverpool supporters died at the FA Cup semi-final on April 15, 1989, when police opened an exit gate to the ground to alleviate crowding outside and failed to direct supporters away from the tunnel leading to Central Pens where the crush happened. Because as well, back in these days, guys, there were no seats in the stands either. It was all terraces, and you know, we had a lot of crushes and we had a lot of near disasters as well before Hillsborough happened. It was a matter of time, but at the same time, the police really, really messed up on this one massively. IOPC Deputy Director General Kathy Cashel said the victims, their families and survivors had been repeatedly let down. Also saying, quote, First, by the deep complacency of South Yorkshire Police in its preparation for the match, followed by its fundamental failure to grip the disaster as it unfolded, and then through the force's concerted efforts to deflect the blame onto the Liverpool supporters, which caused enormous distress to bereaved families and survivors for nearly 4 decades. They were let down by the inexplicably narrow investigation into the disaster conducted by West Midlands Police, which was a missed opportunity to bring these failings to light sooner. End quote. The West Midlands officers who led the investigation into the disaster, Mervyn Jones, who was Assistant Chief Constable and then Detective Chief Superintendent Michael Foster, were referred to the CPS for their failings, but the threshold for prosecution was not found to have been met, according to the reports. The IOPC said that both former officers would have a case to answer for gross misconduct after failing to conduct a rigorous investigation because they were biased towards the force and against supporters. So not only were the officers of the day incompetent and made mistakes, the people who were meant to be investigating the incompetent officers were also incompetent. Like I said, corruption in the UK police forces is rife, and it's not changed. Mr. Druckenfield, who is now 81 years of age, a chief superintendent on the day, was cleared of gross negligence manslaughter by a jury in 2019. The IOPC report said that he froze in the crisis and found that he had a case to answer for gross misconduct in response to 10 allegations, including for failing to respond and telling the FA officials, in which he later acknowledged was a lie, that the fans had forced their way in. Yeah, he actually said that. The report noted that allegations fans were to blame for the disaster were wholly refuted at new inquests into the deaths, which in 2016 concluded that the fans had been unlawfully killed. Other officers who would have faced cases for gross misconduct related to their actions on the day were Mr. Druckenfield's second-in-command Bernard Murray and his superior Assistant Chief Constable Walter Jackson, who was also noted to have failed in the planning for the match, as well as officers on duty in the Leppings Lane end, Roger Marshall, a superintendent, then Inspector Harry White, and John Morgan, who was a sergeant. Mounted Police Constable David Scott would have faced a case of gross misconduct for his account that his horse suffered cigarette burns from Liverpool fans, an incident which evidence indicated did not take place, according to the IOPC. South Yorkshire Police Chief Mr. Wright, who died in 2011, may he burn in hell, was found to be insensitive by investigators looking at allegations he attempted to promote a false narrative and would have had the case to answer for seeking to deflect blame. Sir Norman, who was a chief inspector at the time, would have a case to answer in relation to allegations that he was deliberately dishonest about his involvement in the disaster when applying for chief constable at Merseyside and misled the public in a press statement, according to the IOPC. The retired chief who led West Yorkshire Police was charged with misconduct in a public office as part of the investigation, but the case was dropped in 2018. The IOPC found retired Detective Chief Inspector Alan Foster would have gross misconduct cases to answer for allegations he pressured officers who resisted amendments to their statements. Mr. Foster, along with former Chief Superintendent Donald Denton and Force Solicitor Peter Metcalfe, was charged with doing acts tending and intended to pervert the course of justice, but halfway through their trial in 2021, a judge ruled there was no case to answer. Investigators found South Yorkshire Police did attempt to deflect blame from the disaster away from the police, but Miss Cashel said that they did not find evidence of an orchestrated cover-up to the evidence threshold that they would need to meet. The report also said there was no evidence that the attempts to deflect blame were related to Freemasonry or an attempt to promote a Freemason. The report also said that there was no evidence that attempts to deflect blame were related to Freemasonry or an attempt to promote a Freemason. The only person to be convicted as a result of the probes is former Sheffield Wednesday club secretary Graham Mackerel, who was fined £6,500 and ordered to pay £5,000 of costs after he was found guilty of failing to ensure the health and safety of fans arriving at the ground. 36 years and counting. Still no justice for the 97. It really is shameful. My country should be ashamed of itself for this. It really should be. You know, the only reason, according to this, why those people have got off who are not going to face any consequences because the law at the time in the 1980s was different to what it is now. I just think that is so backwards in the most literal sense. I mean, You found that these people have done wrong. I mean, if you got found out that you killed somebody in the 1980s, would you still be charged for it now if you admitted to it? I like to think you would be. So why should this be any different? People literally died. Nearly 100 people died. It's the worst disaster in the history of British football. And nobody, basically nobody, faced any kind of consequences. And even then, that's barely anything. I mean, for all those people that ended up dying, that's not a lot. It's not a lot. So, you know, it's like Jesse from Breaking Bad. It's, you know, it's like they can't keep getting away with this, but they keep getting away with it because the British justice system clearly doesn't work, you know, and these people are still around for the most part. They're really old. But like I said, you know, when they do pass, I hope they burn in hell for what they did. I really do, because they not only messed up, but then attempted to cover it up as well, which is even worse than the actual just gross negligence in the first place. The fact that they then try and hide from it and have succeeded in doing so. It's worked. That's the worst part. But guys, this video has been very long. There's a lot to go through with it, obviously. Get your thoughts in the comments below. Will the victims ever get proper justice for this? Will they face any kind of consequences for this, the people on the day who were there? I want to hear what you have to say in the comments below. I'm rather pessimistic about those chances, to be honest. But yeah, like, share, comment, subscribe, guys. See you soon.